reading today from Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It's by Judy Blume. And the book contains several themes that are centered around growing up. My focus today will be on religion, specifically organized religion versus one's personal relationship with God, and also religious intolerance. In this book, Margaret is almost 12, and she's moved from New York City to a suburban area called Farbrook, New Jersey. She's going to need to start 6th grade and make new friends at school and in her neighborhood. Later, when I was getting ready for bed, I walked into a closet, thinking it was the bathroom. Would I ever get used to living in this house? When I finally made it into bed and turned out the light, I saw shadows on my wall. I tried to shut my eyes and not think about them, but I kept checking to see if they were still there. I couldn't fall asleep. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I'm in my new bedroom, but I still have the same bed. It's so quiet here at night, nothing like the city. I see shadows on my wall and hear these funny creaking sounds. It's scary, God. Even though my father says all houses make noises and the shadows are only trees. I hope he knows what he's talking about. I met a girl today. Her name is Nancy. She expected me to be very grown up. I think she was disappointed. Don't you think it's time for me to start growing, God? If you could arrange it, I'd be very glad. Thank you. My parents don't know I actually talk to God. I mean, if I told them, they'd think I was some kind of religious fanatic or something. So I keep it very private. I can talk to him without moving my lips if I have to. My mother says God is a nice idea. He belongs to everybody. The next day we went to the hardware store where my father bought a deluxe power lawnmower. That evening, after our first at-home in New Jersey supper, turkey sandwiches from the local delicatessen, my father went out to cut the grass with his new mower. He did fine on the front, but when he got around to the backyard, he had to check to see how much grass there was in the bag on the mower. It's a very simple thing to do. The man at the hardware store demonstrated just how to do it. Only you have to turn the mower off before you reach inside, and my father forgot that. I heard him yell, "Barbara, I've had an accident!" He ran to the house. He grabbed a towel and wrapped it around his hand before I had a chance to see anything. Then he sat down on the floor and turned very pale. "Oh my God," my mother said when the blood seeped through the towel. "Did you cut it off?" When I heard that, I raced outside to look for the limb. I didn't know if they were talking about the whole hand or what, but I had read about how you're supposed to save limbs if they get cut off because sometimes the doctor can sew them back on. I thought it was a good thing they had me around to think of those things, but I couldn't find a hand or any fingers, and by the time I came back into the house, the police were there. My mother was on the floor too, with my father's head in her lap. I rode in the police car with them since there was no one at home to stay with me. I had a silent talk with God on the way to the hospital. I said this inside my head so no one would notice. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. My father's had an awful accident. Please help him, God. He's really very kind and nice. Even though he doesn't know you the way I do, he's a good father. And he needs his hand, God. So please, please let him be all right. I'll do anything you say if you help him. Thank you, God. It turned out that my father hadn't cut off anything, but it took 8 stitches to sew up his finger. The doctor who sewed him was Dr. Potter. After he was through with my father, he came out to chat. When he saw me, he said, "I have a daughter about your age." I love the way people always think they know somebody your age until you tell them how old you really are. "I'm going on 12, I said. "Oh, Gretchen is almost 12 too," the doctor said. Well, he was right about my age. "She'll be in the 6th grade at Delano School." "So will you, Margaret," my mother reminded me, as if I needed reminding. "I'll tell Gretchen to look for you," Dr. Potter said. Fine, I told him. As soon as we got home from the hospital, my father told my mother to look up Moose Freed in the phone book and arrange for him to cut our lawn once a week. Okay, now at this point, Margaret has made 3 special girlfriends in her class, and they have created a secret club. We had a secret vote to pass the club name, and naturally it passed. Then Margaret decided we should all have, no, then Nancy decided we should all have secret sensational names, such as Alexandra, Veronica, Kimberly, and Mavis. Nancy got to be Alexandra, and I was Mavis. Nancy reminded us that nobody in school was to know anything about our secret club, and that at secret meetings such as this, we were to use our secret names. We had to all solemnly swear. Then we all had to think up a rule. Nancy's rule was we all had to wear bras. I felt my cheeks turn red. I wondered if the others wore them already. I didn't think Janie did because she looked down at the floor after Nancy said it. Gretchen's rule was the first one to get her period had to tell the others all about it, especially how it feels. Janie's rule was we all had to keep a boy book, which was a notebook with a list of boys' names in the order in which we liked them. Each week we had to change our lists and pass the boy books around. Finally, Nancy asked me what my rule was. I couldn't think of one to equal the others, so I said, we meet on a certain day each week. Naturally, Nancy said, but what day? Well, I don't know. Okay, let's think up a good day, Gretchen said. Tuesday and Thursday are out. I have to go to Hebrew school. Oh, Gretchen, Janie said, you and that Hebrew school business, can't you get out of it? I'd love to, Gretchen explained, but I've got to get one more year and then I'm through. How about you, Margaret? Do you go? Janie asked me. You mean to Hebrew school? Yes. No, I don't go, I said. Margaret doesn't even go to Sunday school. Isn't that right, Nancy? Yes, I answered. How'd you arrange that? Gretchen asked. I'm not any religion, I said. You're not? Gretchen's mouth fell open. What are your parents? Janie asked. Nothing, I said. How positively neat, Gretchen said. Then they all just looked at me and nobody said anything, and I felt pretty silly, so I tried to explain. See, my father was Jewish, and my mother was Christian, and Nancy's face lit up. Go on, she said. This was the first time they were interested in anything I had to say. Well, my mother's parents, who live in Ohio, told her they didn't want a Jewish son-in-law. If she wanted to ruin her life, that was her business. They would never accept my father for her husband. No kidding, Gretchen said. How about your father's family? Well, my grandmother wasn't happy about getting a Christian daughter-in-law, but at least she accepted the situation. So what happened, Janie asked. They eloped. Oh, how romantic, Nancy said. So that's why they're not anything. I don't blame them, Gretchen said. I wouldn't be either. But if you aren't any religion, how are you going to know if you should join the Y or the Jewish Community Center, Janie asked. I don't know, I said. I never thought about it. Maybe we won't join either one. But everybody belongs to one or the other, Nancy said. Well, I guess that will be up to my parents, I said, ready to change the subject. I never meant to tell them my story in the first place. So, what day should we meet? Nancy announced that Friday was no good for a meeting day because she had piano lessons. Janie said she had ballet on Wednesday. So I said they'd only left Mondays, and we agreed that Monday would be our meeting day. Next week we had to bring our boy books and get checked to make sure we were all wearing bras. When the meeting was over, Nancy raised her arms high above her head. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Here's to the 4 PTSs. Hooray! Long live the PTSs," we chanted. All through supper, I thought about how I was going to tell my mother I wanted to wear a bra. I wondered why she had never asked me if I wanted one, since she knew so much about being a girl. When she came in to kiss me goodnight, I said it. I want a bra. Just like that, no beating around the bush. My mother turned the bedroom light back on. "Margaret, how come?" "I just do is all." I hid under the covers so she couldn't see my face. My mother took a deep breath. "Well, if you really want to, we'll have to go shopping on Saturday. Okay?" "Okay," I smiled. My mother wasn't bad. She turned out the light and closed my door halfway. Was I glad that was over? "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I just told my mother I want a bra. Please help me grow, God. You know where. I want to be like everyone else. You know, God, my new friends all belong to the Y or the Jewish Community Center. Which way am I supposed to go?" I don't know what you want me to do about that. The next day after school, Mr. Benedict called me up to his desk. Margaret, he said, I'd like to discuss your getting to know you paper. For instance, why do you hate religious holidays? Oh, was I sorry I wrote that. How positively stupid of me. If it was true that he was trying to find out if we were normal, I guess he thought I wasn't. I half laughed. Oh, I just wrote that. I really don't hate them all. You must have had a reason. You can tell me. It's confidential. I raised my right eyebrow at Mr. Benedict. I can do that really good. Raise one without the other. I do it whenever I can't think of anything to say. People notice it right away. Some people actually ask me how I do it. They forget what we were talking about and concentrate on my right eyebrow. I don't know exactly how I do it. What I do is I think about it, and the eyebrow goes up. I can't do it with my left, only my right. Mr. Benedict noticed, but he didn't ask me anything about how I do it. He just said, I'm sure you have a perfectly good reason for hating religious holidays. I knew he was waiting for me to say something. He wasn't going to just forget about it. So I decided to get it over with in a hurry. None of those holidays are special to me. I don't belong to any religion, I said. Mr. Benedict seemed pleased, like he had uncovered some deep, dark mystery. I see. And your parents? They aren't any religion. I'm supposed to choose my own when I grow up. If I want to, that is. Mr. Benedict folded his hands and looked at me for a while. Then he said, Okay, Margaret, you can go now. I hope he decided I was normal after all. I lived in New York for 11 and a half years, and I don't think anybody ever asked me about my religion. I never even thought about it. Now, all of a sudden, it was the big thing in my life. That night when Grandma called, she told me she'd gotten a subscription to Lincoln Center for the two of us. We'd meet one Saturday a month, have lunch, then go to a concert. Grandma really is clever. She knew my parents would never say no to one Saturday a month at Lincoln Center. That was culture, and they thought culture was very important. And now Grandma and I would have a chance to spend some time alone. But I was glad that Lincoln Center didn't start right away because I didn't want anything to interfere with Bra Day. Okay, now she's with her grandma. Then we went to the concert. I didn't fidget like when I was a little kid. I sat very still and paid attention to the music. During intermission, Grandma and I walked around outside. I love that fountain in the middle of Lincoln Center. I love it more than the concerts themselves. And I love to watch the people walk by. Once I saw a model having her picture taken by the fountain. It was freezing cold and she was wearing a summer dress. That's when I decided not to be a model, even if I did get beautiful someday. In the cab on the way back to the bus terminal, I thought about Grandma being Jewish. She was the perfect person to help me start my project. So I asked her, can I go to temple with you sometime? Grandma absolutely stared at me. I never knew anyone could open her eyes so wide. What are you saying? Are you saying you want to be Jewish? She held her breath. No, I'm saying I'd like to go to temple and see what it's all about. My Margaret. Grandma threw her arms around me. I think the cab driver thought we were crazy. I knew you were a Jewish girl at heart. I always knew it. Grandma took out a lacy hanky and dabbed her eyes. I'm not, Grandma, I insisted. You know, I'm not anything. You can say it, but I'll never believe it. Never. She blew her nose. When she finished blowing, she said, I know what it is. You've made a lot of Jewish friends in Fargo. Am I right? No, Grandma, my friends have nothing to do with this. Then what? I don't understand. I just want to see what it's all about. So can I? I certainly was not going to tell Grandma about Mr. Benedict. Grandma sat back in her seat and beamed at me. I'm thrilled. I'm going right home to call the rabbi. Come with me on Rosh Hashanah. Then she stopped smiling and asked, does your mother know? I shook my head. Your father? I shook it again. Grandma slapped her hand across her forehead. You be sure and tell them it's not my idea. Would I be in trouble? Don't worry, Grandma. That's ridiculous, my mother said when I told her. You know how Daddy and I feel about religion? You said I could choose when I grow up, but you're not ready to choose yet, Margaret. I just want to try it out. I'm going to try church too, so don't get hysterical. I'm not hysterical. I just think it's foolish for a girl of your age to bother herself with religion. Can I go, I asked. I'm not going to stop you, my mother said. Fine, then I'll go. On Rosh Hashanah morning, while I was still in bed, I said, Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I'm going to temple today with Grandma. It's a holiday. I guess you know that. Well, my father thinks it's a mistake, and my mother thinks the whole idea is crazy, but I'm going anyway. I'm sure this will help me decide what to be. I've never been inside a temple or a church. I'll look for you, God. In the last section of the book that I want to share with you, Margaret meets her mother's parents, that is, her maternal grandparents, for the first time. On April 5th, my mother and I drove to Newark Airport to meet them. My father didn't come. He thought it would be better if he stayed at home and greeted them there. All the way to the airport, my mother briefed me. Margaret, I'm not trying to make excuses for my mother and father, but I want you to know that your grandparents have their beliefs too. 14 years ago, well, they did what they thought was right, even though we know it was cruel. Their beliefs were that important to them. Am I making any sense to you? Some, I said. When they announced the arrival of Flight 894 from Toledo, I followed my mother to the gate. I knew it was them right away. I knew it by the way they walked down the airplane stairs, clutching each other. And when they got closer, I knew it by my grandmother's shoes, black with laces and fat heels, old lady shoes. My grandfather had white hair around the edges and none on top. He was shorter and fatter than my grandmother. They looked around a bit before my mother called out, Here we are, over here. They walked toward us, growing more excited as they recognized my mother. She gave each of them a short hug. I stood there feeling dumb until my grandmother said, And this must be Margaret Ann. When she said it, I noticed the cross around her neck. It was the biggest one I ever saw, and it sparkled. I didn't want them to touch me, and maybe they could tell, because my grandmother bent over as if to kiss me. I stiffened. I didn't mean to. It just happened. I think my mother knew how I felt, because she told them we'd better see about the luggage. When we got home, my father met us at the front door and carried in their suitcases. They had two of them, both brown, both new. Hello, Herb, my grandmother said. Hello, Mrs. Hutchins, my father answered. I thought how funny it was for my father to call her Mrs. My grandfather shook hands with my father. You're looking well, Herb, he said. My father pressed his lips together, but finally managed to say thank you. I thought, this is harder on my father than it is on me. My mother and I showed my grandparents to their room. Then my mother went down to see about dinner. I said, if there's anything you need, just ask me. Thank you, Margaret Ann, my grandmother said. She had a funny way of scrunching up her mouth. You don't have to call me Margaret Ann. Nobody does. Just Margaret is fine. After dinner, her grandmother turned to her. Do you like school? She asked. Most of the time, I said. Do you get good marks? Pretty good, I said. How do you do in Sunday school? My mother came back into the den then and sat down next to me. I don't go to Sunday school, I said. You don't? No. Father, that's what grandmother called grandfather. He called her mother. What is it, mother? Grandfather said. Margaret doesn't go to Sunday school. Grandmother shook her head and played with her cross. Look, my mother said, trying to smile, you know we don't practice any religion. Here it comes, I thought. Wanted to leave the room, but then I felt like I was glued to my seat. We hoped by now you had changed your mind about religion. Especially for Margaret's sake, grandmother added. A person's got to have religion. Let's not get into a philosophical discussion, my father said, annoyed. He sent my mother a warning look across the room. Grandfather laughed. I'm not being a philosopher, Herb. Look, my mother explained. We're letting Margaret choose her own religion when she's grown. If she wants to, my father said defiantly. Nonsense, grandmother said. A person doesn't choose religion. A person's born to it, grandfather boomed. Grandmother smiled at last and gave a small laugh. So Margaret is Christian, she announced. Like we all should have known. Please, my mother said. Margaret could just as easily be Jewish. Don't you see, if you keep this up, you're going to spoil everything. I don't mean to upset you, dear, grandmother told my mother, but a child is always the religion of the mother. And you, Barbara, were born a Christian. You were baptized. It's that simple. Margaret is nothing, my father stormed, and I'll thank you for ending this discussion right now. I didn't want to listen anymore. How could they talk like that in front of me? Didn't they know I was a real person with feelings of my own? Margaret, grandmother said, touching my sleeve, it's not too late for you, dear. You're still God's child. Maybe while I'm visiting, I could take you to church and talk to the minister. He might be able to straighten things out. Stop it, I hollered, jumping up. All of you, just stop it. I can't stand another minute of listening to you. Who needs religion? Who? Not me. I don't need it. I don't even need God. I ran out of the den and up to my room. I heard my mother say, why did you have to start? Now you've ruined everything. I was never going to talk to God again. What did he want from me anyway? I was through with him and his religions. I was never going to set foot in the Y or the Jewish Community Center. Never. The next morning I stayed in my room. I wouldn't even go down to breakfast. I caught myself starting to say, are you there, God? But then I remembered that I wasn't talking to him anymore. So, you'll have to read the book to find out if the bra fits, if her period starts, and if she ever speaks to God again.